Today in our 2017 Ford F-53 chassis motorhome, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install the SumoSprings Rebel Custom Helper Springs for the front axle. Having a motorhome can be a great thing. We can take trips with our family and see a lot of places that we could never see before. But one thing that a lot of people don't talk about and don't think about is the suspension and how their motorhome is going to drive. Here at etrailer.com, we see a lot of the issues of customers coming in complaining that their motorhome feels like it's rolling, it's got a lot of body roll, and just not all that stable going down the road. And we can see in our motorhome there's quite a bit of space for wind to catch the side. We're basically driving a giant windscreen going down the highway. So we're fighting that wind, pushing the steering wheel back and forth, which eventually can get very tiring and not very much fun once we get to our location. So we're going to take our motorhome out on our test course and see how it handles before we put our suspension upgrades on. As I'm driving through our bump course here, I can definitely feel each time I hit a bump, whether it's a solid bump and the front end's coming up and coming back down and bouncing really hard, or if it's the alternating bumps to where we're getting a lot of body roll back and forth. It really just doesn't feel very solid or planted on the ground. Now as I come up to the Slalom Course and I'm going in and out of turns, I can really feel the body roll. Every time I make a turn, it almost feels like my motorhome wants to lean before it actually starts reacting. And with the wind today, I'm definitely fighting the steering wheel, trying to get it back to center. So here's what our SumoSprings are going to look like once we have them installed. Now these are going to greatly improve the ride quality and reduce the amount of driver fatigue so we can fully enjoy our motorhome. I do want to mention that we have the front end of our motorhome lifted up because we just got done installing our springs here, and that's why we have such a big gap. Our springs are going to install in between our axle and the frame and provide a lot of support for their extra weight. Typically on a motorhome we might have a slide out, which is going to cause a lot of extra weight on the front end, and we're asking our suspension to do a lot of work. Not only hold up our motorhome, but also the extra weight of the slide out. Our springs are going to absorb a lot of the road shock when we're going down the road, as well as reduce the amount of sway we feel whenever we're driving around turns. And the two-piece design of our springs are going to make it so we have an unlimited amount of suspension travel, even on the rebound when we come back up, which is going to make for a smoother ride whether we're loaded or unloaded. Our springs are going to work independent from each other from side to side. And that's going to help out if we have an off-center load or if we take an evasive maneuver. The springs themselves are made out of a durable, microcellular urethane, and it's going to work in temperature ranges from negative 25 degrees Fahrenheit all the way up to 200 degrees Fahrenheit, and it is going to resist damage caused by oil, road salts, and UV rays. When we do put the weight down, our two springs are going to come together and start to compress. Now, the nice thing about it is that they're going to have very minimal side expansion, so they're going to work great even in those tight areas because we're not going to have to worry about them expanding too much. Our SumoSprings are going to have a 2,600 pound weight capacity. Now keep in mind that's not going to increase the payload of your vehicle, it's just there to help support that extra weight. And the best thing about our springs is that they're going to be completely maintenance free. Once we have them installed, we're not going to have to do anything else. We're not going to have to worry about airlines or monitoring air pressure like you do with airbags. But they'll come with everything we need to get them installed, and they're not going to require any kind of drilling. So now that we have everything installed, we're going to take our motorhome back out on the test course and see how it handles. Now, as I'm driving over our bumps course, I can immediately feel a lot of difference. Don't get me wrong, there's still a little bit of roll, just naturally it's going to happen, but it's a lot more stable and it feels a lot more controlled, and the rebound isn't having the motorhome go up as high. And even on the solid speed bumps, it just feels like it's genuinely handling a little bit better and handling the bumps better. And as I continue down to our slalom course, going in and out of the turns, it definitely feels a lot more stable. There's not as much body roll. Doesn't feel like a sports car, but it definitely is a lot more stable, and I have a lot more confidence driving through the course. To begin our installation, we want to lift up the front of our motorhome so that the suspension can sag down. Now you want to make sure that it's all supported, but once you have it up in the air, we're going to find our factory joust stop. Now we're on the driver's side, so we're right above the axle. We're going to need to remove the factory joust stop. So you're going to grab a short extension and a 13mm socket. We're going to go through the hole at the bottom of the joust stop. And right now we're just going to break it loose. But if we come to the inside of the frame, it's going to be hollow right here. On top of the joust stop, we're going to have a nut that we're going to have to hold with a wrench so we can get it out. So we'll grab a 15mm wrench, hold the nut on the top while we turn the bolt on the bottom. And once we have the bolt loosened enough, should be able to reach up top, remove it the rest of the way, but we're going to want to hold on to the hardware. So we're going to grab the upper section of our joust stop from the packaging. Now the upper bracket and the upper section most likely is going to be attached. We're going to want to remove the 2 bolts and separate the top bracket from the actual joust stop. So we'll set this aside right now, and we're going to be mounting this to the frame. So we'll take our factory bolt, we're going to come from the bottom, go up through the bracket, and then secure it down with the nut. Now our bracket, the hole in the center will line up with the hole that we removed our joust stop from. So we'll make sure that the bolts are facing out towards the tire, and this little lip right here is going to catch on the frame. So we'll loosely get it in place, and we'll take our bolt, line our bolt up, we'll go through our bracket and through the frame, and then we'll secure it down with that nut. So we'll just reach over the top and get the nut in hand tight for now. I'm going to come back with that same 13mm wrench and 15mm socket, and I'm going to tighten up the hardware. Once it gets close, you just want to make sure that it lines up properly and that it's not at an angle. So we can grab our joust stop now. You want to make sure it's the top section. So we'll have 4 threaded holes on this plate right here. And if we turn it over, there's going to be a hole in the center. Now 2 of these holes will line up with the bolts that are dropping down through our top bracket here. So we'll take our joust stop, we'll line up one of the bolts, and if you can, you just want to turn it a few turns just so we can get it to catch, so the joust stop will suspend itself, then we can work on getting the rest of the hardware in. Now if you're having a little bit of trouble getting it started, you can come and grab a 14mm ratcheting wrench, and we can use that to help get the bolt started and thread it in. And once you have them loosely threaded in so that we know that it won't fall down, I'll take that 14mm ratcheting wrench and I'm going to tighten up both those bolts. So with the upper section in place, we can work on the lower section. Now again, it should be attached, but if it's not, there's going to be a 3/8 bolt that's going to go through our bracket into the bottom of the spring. Now you'll notice I left this loose right now so we can still move it back and forth. I want to go over the orientation of our bracket because they are going to be size specific. Now you'll notice that our joust spring is bolted to the inner hole here, and you want to make sure this large section is facing forward. So the spring is going to be slightly off-center towards the inside, away from the tire, and this large tall section is be going towards the front. So we'll take our lower spring and bracket, and we're going to go directly over the axle. And the tabs on the end here, they need to be straddling the spring pack so that each hole is just on the outside. So once you have the lower section lined up, I'm going to take a marker, and I'm going to mark on my lower bracket and on the spring itself. That way we can remove it and we can tighten the bolt up on the bottom. So I'll make sure my marks are lined up, and I'll come back with a 9/16 socket and tighten up that bolt. Now we can set our spring back in place. We're going to take one of the shorter carriage bolts, and those are going to go in the holes towards the back of our motorhome. So those little tabs on the side, we'll just drop those bolts all the way down through. We're going to have one on the outside and one on the inside for those back holes. Now for the ones in the front, since they're a little bit taller and they're going to take a little more space, we're going to take the long carriage bolts and drop those down through as well. So now we can grab one of our saddle clamps. You'll notice it's going to be kind of a U shape. You want the two tabs to be sticking up. And we'll slide one end onto our bolt and slide the other end in. We'll grab a 3/8 flange nut and we'll secure it down. We want to get them on there hand tight for now, just so we can make sure the clamp stays in place. And once we have these in place, we'll put our clamp on the front two bolts as well. Now the front one is going to be a little close to our sway bar, so you may have to move that bolt a little bit to get the clamp in place and to get the nut started. I'm going to come back with a 9/16 socket and tighten up all my flange nuts. Now when you're tightening up the flange nuts, you do want to alternate going back and forth between the two. That way you have an even clamping force when it tightens down. And we'll tighten down the front clamp as well. And with this side done, we can go and repeat that same process on the other side. That'll finish up your look at the SumoSprings Rebel Custom Helper Springs for the front axle on our 2017 Ford F-53 chassis motorhome.